I'm still processing it, but the Persona 3 remake is real, and for this video I just want to sit down and go over everything that we know, from screenshots to trailers, interviews and more. But of course I'm not just going to be reading the articles, reading the interviews, I'm going to be giving my input, my thoughts, and kind of just discuss all the news that we have, and see if the remake is shaping up to be something good, or if we should be skeptical. Also be sure to check out my breakdown of the reveal trailer, because there are some things that I talk about there which aren't really brought up again in the interviews or in the screenshots. Some things are speculation, some things are actually things that we can see in the game. So if you really want to know everything, check out that video. I'm sure you're gonna like it since you're watching this one. But before we get into this one, if you liked the video, make sure to leave a like and check out my channel, especially if you want to stay up to date with Persona 3 stuff, or if you're interested in all the other stuff that I make. So be sure to subscribe, all the support is greatly appreciated. But now let's get started by looking at all of this information. I've already compiled all of the information and I'm gonna segment it depending on what the information is about. So if you're interested in a specific aspect of this remake, then you can just skip ahead to the timestamps in the description below. All the information will also be linked down in the description, and if I mention a specific quote or anything like that, I'm gonna have it on screen. But if you're still interested in reading the full article for itself, it's in the description as well. To start off, a lot of these interviews talk about the general development process, and while this isn't about the content of the game itself, I do want to recap what they talked about here. I always just think that it's interesting to see how the developers approach the project and what they wanted to achieve with it. Why did they even start the project and how did the process go? So in the IGN interview they mentioned that the game has been in development since early 2019. This was mostly just early development and the planning stages. In other interviews they go into more detail, saying that later that year, when Persona 5 Royal released, almost everyone from the Royal development team moves on from Persona 5 to Reload, which is then when the game entered full development. Because of this, the game will play very closely to Persona 5, not in the way that Persona 3 Reload is a Persona 5 reskin, but in the way of putting Persona 3 on the same level. But we'll talk about that more in a second. Apparently, the idea of a Persona 3 remake has also been floating around at Atlus for a while, from before 2019 already, because Persona 3 is a very special game to a lot of the staff members, but it's also the turning point for the series, since Persona 3 is really where Persona became more than just an SMT spin-off. Many of the staff even played Persona 3 back when it came out. Some of them have worked on the original P3, but others even played it before entering the game industry, so they were literally just playing the game like we were as a fan. And in all of the interviews they talk about this a lot, about how they approach this remake as fans of the original, and how they're really passionate about it, about how they would sometimes think back about their time with the game, what they thought was missing from it, what they thought could be improved, to really look at this project from the perspective of what would the fans want, giving them a better insight on the positives and negatives of the original. And honestly, I think that that's the best way to approach a remake, since you're making it for the fans, you're making it for the players. So for them to work on this as fans definitely turns this into a passion project, and you can already see it by the way that they're talking about it. They're super excited to finally show this game to us. And you can see that they understand the game as well, especially when mentioning the rougher edges of it, because while you definitely need to clean up some of those rough edges, if you get rid of all of them, you're at risk of losing what Persona 3 is. So I'm glad to see that the devs think the same way about it. They basically said those exact words, and they're not just discarding anything just because the newer Persona games don't have it. The goal here really was to recreate Persona 3 and to bring it up to the level of Persona 5, not to just evolve Persona 3, but to deepen the experience, to keep the foundation, the story, the characters, everything that Persona 3 is known for, but to flesh them out and to create a more in-depth exploration of the story, the characters, just the game in general. And they also talked about the fact that while the game is definitely important for them, they're also very aware of how important it is to us. They've been looking at the surveys, they've been looking at Persona 3 Remake trending for years. They saw our demands, and here we are now. I think it's just really nice to hear that these developers and these studios are actually listening to the fans, and that these surveys can bring a game that we were dreaming of into existence. And now that the game is close to being finished, they also mentioned how they're really happy that they're able to realize their original vision. They don't really have the feeling of, could we have done more, or what are we still missing? And they're sure that the fans will be satisfied with the final product. Now, whether or not the fans are satisfied is kind of a hot topic in the fandom. Which then brings me to the next part of the interviews, being the contents of the game, specifically story-wise. And I'm gonna get the big one out of the way first. The thing that put the entire fandom on fire, and the reason why some fans aren't really that satisfied with the remake. And that reason is that Persona 3 Reload will not have the female protagonist or the answer. The remake will be a remake of the original Persona 3, but that does not mean that there won't be any content from FES or Portable, and I cannot stress this enough, because a lot of people seem to think that this is just Persona 3 Vanilla but in HD. We don't know the details of what will or will not be included, but I think that it's pretty safe to say that stuff like the Aegis social link, the Elizabeth dates, weapon fusions and all of that stuff will still be here. But I do kinda get your reason for this confusion, since there's this IGN headline that released, I think a few hours after the original reveal trailer came out, stating that there won't be FES or Portable content. And that's just not true. I don't know if it's a mistranslation or if IGN was just clickbaiting, but in many interviews that were released a few days later, Atlas stated that Reload is a remake of the original Persona 3, and because of that it won't include the additional story scenario, the answer, or the female protagonist, but, and I quote, they also said, this does not mean that elements added to the main story in FES are not included in Reload at all, heavily hinting that the elements that enhance the main story of Persona 3 will be returning. Now, I do get that some people might still be disappointed after hearing this, but in my opinion it's not that big of a deal, especially because of all the other stuff that they've mentioned in the interview, because they didn't stop here. They continued by saying that this remake will be of substantial size, and that it will feature new additional story content. So it's not just vanilla P3 in HD, it's also not just vanilla P3 plus some elements of FES and Portable, it's really its own thing, trying to bring the best parts out of Persona 3. Now, we don't have a lot of details on this additional content just yet, but we do know some stuff, so let's take a look at everything that we know. The main thing that are being added are these side stories. This is a completely new element for the Persona series, and this is their solution to the missing social links that the female protagonist introduced in Portable. TLDR, in any version of Persona 3, if you played as the male protagonist, you didn't have a social link with the male party members, like Junpei for example. In Portable, however, they added the female protagonist. And to add some more variety between the routes and to add romance options for her, because for some reason Atlas doesn't allow you to be gay, they added the male social links. So you could, for example, hang out or date with Akihiko. But in Persona 3, even when playing as the male protagonist, it's not really like you're missing out on these characters just because they don't have a social link. Because in Persona 3, all of the character development happens in the main story, and it's not really sidelined to the social links, which is a complaint that a game like Persona 5 often has. Because while, yeah, the majority of their development is in the main story, a lot of their character is kinda sidelined, so you can enjoy it in the social links. But Persona 3 doesn't really have this problem, if you're even willing to call it a problem, and because of that, the links that the female protagonist added were mostly just optional and just some fun extra character moments. For most characters at least, because the social links did add a lot of depth to some characters, especially Shinji and Ryoji, giving us a closer look at who they are, their backstory, and all of that stuff, because in the main game of Persona 3, they didn't get that much time. But now in Persona 3 Reload, we won't be having their social links. The reason for that being that the developers wanted to stay very faithful to the original, and if they wanted to give all of these characters social links, Akihiko, Junpei, Shinji, Ryoji, and all of the other ones, they would just have to end up cutting other social links. And yeah, while Persona 3 has the best social links in the entire franchise, there are also some social links that aren't very popular, and some people wouldn't really mind if some of them were being cut, but honestly, I respect the developers' visions for this. I really like that they're not just cutting out social links to fit in the male C's members, but instead they're looking for another way to show their stories, going as far as to include a whole new element with these side stories, so we can have the same connection with these characters, so we can have the same character depth, the same backstory, so we can basically have what we had in Portable without having to replace existing social links. And in this newest trailer, we might have actually gotten our first glimpse at one of these side stories, since we have this scene here with Junpei hanging out with the protagonist in front of the arcade. We're not 100% sure on whether or not this is one of those side stories, but it seems pretty likely, since this is not a scene that happens in the original. And I kinda think that they can do more with these scenes than what they did with the social links that they gave these characters in Portable. Because while I really like some of the Portable social links like Junpei or Shinjiro, there are also some other ones like Ken's or Akihiko's who are, I don't know, they're not my favorite ones. Because while some of their ranks and some of their events have really nice moments going into their characters, who they are, just adding some more depth to them, they also have some other events that just don't feel as necessary, that feel kind of fanfiction-y even, literally just so you can romance that character. Plus, these side stories aren't really held back by the requirements that a social link has, for example. Like Ikutsuki or Strega, there are characters that could use some more screen time if they really wanted to go further in on them, but a social link with them just wouldn't work, and these side stories gives them the perfect opportunity to do so, since you can just have scenes with the character in question, even if the protagonist isn't there. Now, of course, this is mostly speculation, we don't have a lot of details on these side stories, but I think it's very interesting, and all of those reasons is why I'm mostly fine with her not being a female route. Because while, don't get me wrong, I do really love the female protagonist, I loved my time playing as her in Portable and I think it's a great addition to Portable, I love her because of what her route adds to the game, for the most part. Like the Shinjiro, Ryoji, Junpei social links, and these side stories could easily fill the gap that leaves. Now, of course, those aren't all of her social links. I'll definitely miss Saori, who was one of my favorite social links in Persona 3 Portable. But that being said, we have Portable. I have it installed on my PC, I have it installed on my PS5, and it's also available on the eShop for the Nintendo Switch. So while, yeah, I guess it would have been nice to have her in Reload, I won't deny that, I think it's very understandable. Persona 3 Reload started development in 2019. The game will release in 2024. That's 4 to 5 years of development time for only one protagonist and his social links. This is already one of Atlus's biggest projects. Now imagine if they had to add a second route to this, a second route with different dialogue options, a different OST, different social links, different armor sets, basically different everything. Like, there's a reason why Portable doesn't have animated cutscenes. Yeah, they wanted to save storage space, but also they wouldn't have to reanimate every single cutscene twice. The PSP port was kinda perfect for something like this, because they were already downscaling the game so much in so many ways. It didn't add that much work compared to what it would end up being for a game like this. All of this just to say that adding her isn't just a simple reskin of the male route. If Reload had both protagonists, we would kinda get into a complicated situation, because the male route would need these new side stories anyway, even if the female protagonist adds the social links, because otherwise we would basically have Persona 3 Portable but in HD? And if we add these side stories for the male route, then what are they gonna do with the female route? Does she also get new side stories? And if so, what are they gonna be about? Then what will her social links be about? Or do we not give her side stories? In which case the male route will be the remake, and it'll just come bundled together with a female route that didn't change outside of the visuals. Which gives us another Portable situation, but the roles will just be switched. In Portable, the male route was basically a watered down one-to-one port of FES, and the female route was where they added all the new content. And if Reload were to go down this route, we would just have the opposite. And I'm 100% sure that we would either not get side stories in that situation, or we would get the Portable situation that I just explained, in which case fans also wouldn't be happy. So as much as I would have loved to see the female protagonist again, this is basically asking for them to make 2 games in one remake, which is not realistic, and I'd rather just have them focus on making one ultimate Persona 3 experience. But of course, just like there will be FES content, that's not to say that this remake won't include any changes that the female protagonist brought with her. I feel like it's pretty safe to say, for example, that the male protagonist will have the added feature of not being forced to romance everyone, for example. Now, this hasn't been confirmed, but they keep talking about wanting the game to be more like modern titles, to be up to standard with 5, to play like 5. I feel like it's a given that you won't just auto-romance everyone. The female protagonist aside though, the answer is kind of a different story. Because I would have really liked to see the answer here, especially since it's not of the same size as a female route, it's just an epilogue chapter. And yeah, say what you will about the original answer. I know that it's pretty divisive, but personally I thought it was pretty okay. Yeah, the gameplay and structure sucked ass, that's no discussion, but the story I kinda liked and I thought it was interesting. It was just a cool addition, a cool epilogue, so I would have really liked to see them have another go at the answer. Structure it differently, make it more fun to play, iron out the small story problems that most people have with it, and I do think that the remake was kind of the perfect opportunity for this. Now, sadly, we're not getting it. It's disappointing, but also it's not that big of a deal. Maybe they'll even make it into a DLC, which could always happen, and I'll be fine with that as long as it's not a day 1 DLC. So in general, I don't mind that we don't have the female protagonist or the answer. I feel like it'll also help the devs focus on their goal, which isn't just to take all of the Persona 3 content and mash it together into one version, but to actually make the best Persona 3. To look at what Persona 3 really is, to look at all of the content, what was there and what's been added over the years, and just to try and turn that into the best experience possible. But to move on from the FES and Portable content, let's focus on what Reload is doing, because outside of the side stories, there's also a lot of room for smaller interactions or events to be sprinkled in. Like if we look at Persona 5 compared to Persona 5 Royal or 4 compared to 4 Golden, all of these games added some extra events like summer festivals, or they extended already existing events. And I can definitely see something similar happen here with holidays like Christmas or the movie festival, because Christmas especially was kind of lackluster in Persona 3 compared to what they did in the other games. Besides for that, we also have these screenshots, one where you're cooking with Yukari and this one with Fuka, and I already speculated on this in my trailer breakdown video, but since we've been getting more screenshots, of course there's more to speculate about, because we know that these events are not in the original Persona 3. There's no social link rank with Yukari where you're cooking together, and while you do hang out with Fuka at this location, this is not really a line that's brought up or could be brought up in the context that they're talking in that conversation. So this makes me think that they might have reworked social link events, but since the devs keep talking about how they want to stay really faithful to the original, I feel like it wouldn't really be reworking social links, but maybe fleshing them out, which is honestly the better of the two options. Or another option is that this is something completely new. Maybe the game will add different opportunities to interact with the side characters or the party members, characters. Like, maybe you can do some chores around the dorm, which could include cooking, or maybe you can run into the side characters when you're on the way home from a club activity or something. Kinda like Persona 5, where you keep running into your social links on the way to school. But of course, in Persona 3, you're all living in the dorm, so maybe it would make sense if you're on the way back from school? I don't know, of course, I just thought it would be kinda cool. And then there's this one other screenshot, which also took my interest. Weirdly enough, it's only in the Japanese version of this screenshot, and while that one is not in HD, at the top left you can see a mail icon. So I'm guessing that, similar to Persona 5, your social links will be able to send you a message asking you to hang out. Or maybe this can lead into the new side stories, maybe they'll even text you about going to Tartarus, or Elizabeth can remind you about your request. That's all speculation, of course. All we know is that you will be able to receive messages, which is completely new to this game, and it's a nice addition because I did really like that feature in Persona 5. Something else that's confirmed to be returning in Reload is the reversible social link mechanic, which I think is really cool because I kind of expected them to just not put it in the game, just like they didn't put it in Persona 5. But if you don't know, in the original Persona 3, in Fest and in Portable, social links could reverse, meaning that you can basically get into a fight or discussion with the character from the social link, and if you then want to continue their social link, you have to reconcile with them first. In the original, this can be caused by cheating on them romantically, by selecting an obviously wrong dialogue choice, or even by ignoring them for a few months on end. It's a mechanic that I always really liked in theory, just adding some more realism, some more consequences to your actions, but the way that it was implemented in Persona 3 did feel a bit tedious, and I just wanted them to have another look at it. So I was really disappointed when in Persona 4 I didn't run into the mechanic, only to find out that it was still there, but it was just downscaled so much that you rarely run into it. And then in Persona 5 they downscaled it even more by not including it. But now in Persona 3 Reload it's back, and they did say that while social links can reverse, they can't break. A social link breaking is basically if you try to reconcile with them, but you fail because you give another wrong dialogue option, the social link could just break, making it a lot harder to reconcile. They said that they also changed the requirements for a reversible social link, which sounds like the rework that mechanic needed, making it a lot less intrusive and also a lot less annoying since you won't be able to just break the social link. I just hope that it'll still have an impact on the gameplay and that it won't be downgraded as much as it was in Persona 4. But I'm glad that they at least brought it back to take another look at it. I guess we'll have to wait and see how it turns out. But now to wrap up this story and content section, there is one more thing. Kind of a fun fact, I guess, and it really shows that they're going the extra mile here. Persona 3 Reload will have the most voice acting out of every Persona game. Partly because of the additional side stories, but also because every single social link will be fully voiced. And I just think that that's really cool. So many of these social links tell super emotional stories, and hearing them voiced could add so much more emotion to this. And since we're on the topic of voice acting, I thought this would be a good moment to mention it. We have an entirely new voice cast. At least for the English dub. The Japanese voice actors will be returning to their roles, but on the English side it is an entirely new cast. If you want to see the full list of voice actors, it's linked in the description. I'll also have all of the voice actors on screen right now, together with some other characters that they voice. You can already hear their voices in the most recent trailer as well, which came from Anime Expo, and at the panel where they showed that trailer, they also did some line readings of the characters' most popular lines. But keep in mind, those line readings won't be 100% accurate. This is just them reading the lines at a con for a live audience, but it can give you a pretty good idea of what you're gonna sound like. Personally, I really like this new voice cast. They're all really nailing the vibe of the characters. I do have to get used to some of them, especially Akihiko, not because he's a bad voice actor or that it doesn't fit. He's just the one that sounds pretty different to the Akihiko that we're used to. So I'm just gonna have to get used to it. I will still miss some of the original voices though, but at the same time I think it's understandable that they wanted to revisit the casting, especially with the situation of some voice actors that can't really be hired again for this remake. Plus, some of the original voice actors are also just not in the industry anymore, so if you're replacing some of them, why not go all out and give us a whole new cast for this new Persona 3? Something interesting though is that in the TV commercial trailer, we actually hear the voice of Yuri Lowenthal, who previously voiced the protagonist. This trailer starts with a completely new scene visual-wise, but in the background we can hear a researcher talking. Those of us who played the original Persona 3 will definitely know who this researcher is, but I think it's really cool that he's being voiced by Yuri, and it makes me wonder if any other of the original cast members are gonna return in a similar, smaller role. But that then basically covers everything story and content-wise. But of course, there's another very big and important part of the game that they did talk about a lot as well. Being the gameplay, of course. And while we don't have that much information of it, we do know some stuff. Some of which we already talked about in a way, that being just some quality of life add-ons that will be made so the game will play more like the recent entries, aka Persona 5. Like the social links, for example, will be a lot easier to max out in one playthrough. And they did say easier, not easy, which is a very important distinction, because maxing all social links in one playthrough should not be easy. But I do think it should be easier than it was in the original Persona 3, because it was pretty fucking hard. So much so that the devs didn't even know it was possible until someone did it. And when they saw that someone did it, they were literally shocked because you weren't supposed to be able to do that. So it's nice that they loosened that up a bit so we don't have to follow a day-by-day guide. In regards to combat, we have confirmation that we'll be able to control all of our party members, but we will also have the option to let them auto-battle like in Persona 3, and I think that's also in the recent titles. They also reworked the elements that the party members will be using, so every single party member will have one main element, kinda like in the recent Persona games, while in Persona 3 you had things like Koromaru using both dark and fire magic. Multiple physical types are also back. This isn't stated in an interview, but you can see it in these two screenshots. Yukari having a bow using piercing damage, the main character using a sword having slash damage, just like in the original. Now, we don't know if the main character is only gonna be able to use a sword, like in Portable, or if he's gonna be able to equip different weapons like in Fest or in the original. I guess we'll just have to wait a little bit longer for confirmation on that. Other things that could be added to the combat system, but that aren't shown off yet, are things like the baton pass, showtime attacks, just other things that were in Persona 5 and Persona 4, which seems pretty likely to be added because they did say we wanted to play more like Persona 5, but then again we don't know how far this goes. We also have these two screenshots of a Persona summoning, but they look a lot cooler than just your regular attack. So my guess is that this is like a critical cut-in, especially since you can see the glass, which seems like it has 2D illustrations on it, so the art is probably gonna come on screen, you'll hear the evoker shoot, the glass will shatter, and you summon the persona, which sounds really cool and I can't wait to see the full animation. Outside of combat though, when you're in Tartarus, we also have some new features, like the dash, and there will also be more dialogue between the characters just like in Persona 5, basically like I speculated in my breakdown video. Another thing that has been confirmed is that the tired or the fatigue mechanic won't be returning. And while in my other video I did say that I would have really liked for them to keep it and to rework it, the more that I think about it, the more I feel like the tired mechanic has already kind of been replaced by something better. Namely just the way that SP is managed in Persona 4 or Persona 5. In the original Persona 3, your characters would basically get tired after a certain amount of steps taken, or after a certain amount of battles, or if your character dies and you don't revive them. Which means that there's kind of a hard limit to how much you can grind in Tartarus. If your characters are tired, you'll get a debuff and then you're basically forced to leave. But in the later Persona games, they changed it so it's all based on your SP managing. Are you out of SP? Then it's time for you to decide. Are you gonna leave the palace and come back another day? Or will I use an item and stay a bit longer? In theory, this is kind of doing the same thing. It's just the game balancing itself, so you can't just brute force your way through the dungeon in one sitting. But SP balancing adds a lot more to it. Do you really want to use that SP item now, or do you want to keep it for during a boss battle? Of course, the original Persona 3 also had SP items, but you had a lot more of them. Enemies would drop them constantly and you'd never really run out. While in Persona 5 they made them a lot more rare, while at the same time adding a lot more ways to get them. You could make coffee, you could cook curry, you have the garden on the rooftop. There are a lot of game mechanics that can help you get SP items, but they do take up some of your daily lifetime, which I think is a very cool way of doing it. It ties the dungeon gameplay and the daily life gameplay a lot closer together, and I would really like for them to do something similar in Persona 3. Let us interact with more game mechanics in the daily life segments, which will then help us out in Tartarus, instead of showering us with items or just giving us a hard limit of nope, you've done this amount of battles, time to leave Tartarus now. They also changed the tired mechanic a lot already, going from fast to portable, making it so that your characters get tired in portable. The debuffs only come into effect once you leave Tartarus, and then they'll be tired the next day. But because of this, since you have a shit ton of SP items, the tired mechanic kinda became inconsequential, since I would just finish Tartarus in one day without having any trouble, and even if they were tired the day after, I was done for this month, so I didn't really care that they were tired or not. But now let's talk about Tartarus itself. The general layout will remain mostly the same. It'll still have 264 floors. We don't know if it'll have the bonus 10 floors or not, but the main part of Tartarus will be there, and concept-wise it didn't change. However, that doesn't mean that Tartarus didn't change at all. They did add some additions, like the extra dialogue that I mentioned earlier, a sprint or a dash, and small breakable items, all similar to Persona 5, but they do just give you some more reason to explore. But again, they don't talk a lot about Tartarus 4 now, mostly just that it is faithful, that they added some elements, and that it's gotten a major visual upgrade. And while they did say that they're gonna reveal more information at a later date, just by looking at the screenshots, we can already figure some stuff out. Like, let's take a look at the basic layout for a second. In the original Persona 3, we basically had the same layout for 264 floors, only changing the visuals, while we can already see that the remake is gonna be doing a lot more than that. The lower floors are still the classic narrow hallways leading into the bigger rooms with staircases in the corners or all of that stuff, but if we now look at this shot from the trailer, we see that Tartarus is a lot wider. It's not just some hallways connecting rooms, they're like massive halls. Judging by the minimap, you also have those small bridges, those pillars, just a lot more stuff than the empty hallways of the original. And while yeah, it might not be a handcrafted dungeon experience, this is a great upgrade from the original. Also here in this screenshot, we can see the characters go up a massive staircase, which kinda makes me think that the floors within one block might be connected seamlessly with each other. Either that or there's more verticality on single floors, and either one of those would be pretty cool. And while we're analyzing the screenshots, there's one more thing that I did notice in the screenshot of the second floor, namely this golden glow behind the staircase. This could either be a treasure chest or one of those breakable objects that they added, but the interesting thing to me is that it's not marked on the map. Because in the original Persona 3, everything would be marked, and because Tartarus was already kinda boring visually and layout-wise, I would often just solely look at the minimap, because it had all the information that I needed. So I really like that this treasure chest, or this breakable object, whatever it is, isn't marked, and it also won't be marked, because as you can see, the map is filled out, meaning that the player from this screenshot already ran past the chest once, and it didn't get marked. So it looks like you'll have a lot more reason to explore, to actually look around, because you never know what you might find. And then there's also another thing that I do want to bring up while we're talking about dungeons. This is not about Tartarus though, because the game does have some dungeons that aren't Tartarus, one of which we can see in this screenshot, or at least we're seeing the story event leading up to it. And since they're tweaking Tartarus, I was wondering if they possibly did the same here. Of course, you can't do much with some of these, like the train one from the screenshot, but they could flesh out other locations like the hotel, maybe the mall, or the underground stuff. I just think it would be pretty cool. They didn't talk about this or anything, that's just something that came to my mind since they showed this screenshot and since they did change the layout of Tartarus. But what do you all think? Do you think they'll change it slightly? Do you think they'll keep it exactly the same? Or will they actually rework these segments? I'm really curious to see what everyone is thinking on this, because I haven't seen anyone talk about it. But that's basically it for the gameplay. So let's move on to the visuals. And continuing the Tartarus talk, as you've already seen, it looks really gorgeous. I especially love how the light comes in through the window and reflects on the floor. I also really like the change of camera perspective, the wider angle, how it's actually behind you and closer to you, compared to how it used to be more zoomed out, kind of top down, and now you could like look over the walls. In interviews, they also talk about how much effort that they put into making Tartarus more visually interesting by getting the most out of the Unreal Engine, while staying close to the original style, which you can definitely see. This floor in specific is the second floor. If we compare this to the second floor of Portable Tartarus, for example, it's definitely the same style. And if we look at this later floor that we've already seen in the original reveal trailer, it looks like they're sticking to the style of every block very closely, having the floors become more strange and otherworldly as you go up. But yeah, to wrap up Tartarus, it looks fantastic, even from the few screenshots and frames that we have, which is very exciting since the devs mentioned that Tartarus looks good in screenshots, but that they added a lot of motion to everything, and that we can't really see the full scope of visual improvements until we've seen the game in motion. So I'm definitely looking forward to a Tartarus showing. But of course, Tartarus isn't the only area in Persona 3 that got a massive upgrade, and we actually got quite a bit of footage of the protagonist just walking around town, thanks to the IGN interview. And at first glance, of course, it looks fantastic. From the school to the mall, I really love what they're doing with this remake visual-wise. All the places look so lively, there are so many NPCs everywhere, and that's gonna give the Apathy Syndrome a very big impact, even bigger than in the original. It also looks like the NPC stories are back, since we can see these two NPCs here with a speech bubble. If you played the original, you might know who they are if you talk to them. It's not a big deal, it's just two NPCs having a story with each other in the world, continuing even when you don't interact with them. And I just kinda like that. It makes the world feel alive, like stuff is going on even when you are not directly interacting with them. And while we're looking at this footage, that's Kaz from the Sports Club social link right there. I know that this isn't a big deal, it's not even really a thing that matters, but I'm literally pointing out the two unnamed NPCs that have a story going on, so of course I'm gonna point out the social link character that appears on screen for like a second. Moving on though, to quickly compare this footage to the trailer, I kinda feel like this footage is from a more recent build because the game looks a lot cleaner, especially lighting and shadow wise, but honestly that could also just be because the other trailer was mostly nighttime and this is all daytime. And now that we have some more footage, I can also follow up on a point that I made in the trailer breakdown video, namely about the full moon countdowns in the HUD. In the very first trailer and screenshot dump, we only saw this countdown in 2 shots, both of which were in Tartarus. But in this new footage now, we actually have a lot of clips outside of Tartarus showing the countdown. And I also noticed that this countdown only shows up in the clips that take place in June. Okay, so very small spoiler warning before I continue, because I think that this ties into the main story, so I will have to talk about something from the main story, but it's super early game, I don't think anyone's gonna care. But just in case, if you want to stay as blind as possible, first off, I don't know why you're watching this, but second off, skip ahead like 30 seconds. But in the month of June, Fuka is gonna join Cease, and this is also when the gang finds out that these Tartarus events are connected to the full moon. So only at that point, the gang starts counting down to the next full moon. So my guess is that the countdown will only start showing up once the gang realize this, and once they are actually counting down as well, compared to the original where this was just a game mechanic for the player. And I really love that. I think it's awesome when games incorporate mechanics with the story, so if this is what it is, that's really, really cool. While we're looking at the top right of the screen though, there is another small thing that I noticed now that we have some more screenshots, namely that the watcher in the background rises up and becomes a lot higher when it's a full moon. Coincidence? Maybe, but probably not, since that's just how water tides work, and including that into the UI is just a really cool detail that I feel like not a lot of people will notice, but it's details like this that make a game stand out in my opinion, so I like this, very cool. But yeah, moving on from that, going back to the visuals of the game itself, everything just looks really, really nice, and it's really cool to see that everything has a normal size as well. Because if you look at the original Persona 3, everything kind of had weird proportions. Like, things are just comically large, especially the beds and the doors are kind of famous for this, but now that they rebuilt everything from the ground up with this new engine, new camera perspectives and everything, it just looks really nice and a lot more natural. There's not much to say about it, just look at the footage, look at the screenshots and you'll see what I'm talking about. And just like the environments, the characters also got new artwork, including sprites, models and renders, and they all look stunning. I really, really love this art style of the new sprites. I just can't stop looking at them. They all got a massive glow up in both their sprites and in their renders. In this one screenshot you can also see that they're adding special effects to the sprites in certain scenes. Like here with Fuka you have this smoke effect around her, and they're also changing the lighting according to where the character is, which is kind of a small detail, but it's so nice and I feel like it's gonna go a long way. The 3D models themselves also look really nice, especially in those close-up shots, which are probably from either cutscenes or battle animations. I'm honestly surprised with how good they look, especially because in interviews they keep talking about we're trying to make this on the level of Persona 5, but these models look leagues better than the Persona 5 models, even though it makes sense because Persona 5 is still a PS3 game. Here as well, they changed the proportions of the character models, going for a more realistic vibe compared to the original, which was more cartoony with the bigger heads. I'm just looking forward to seeing them in action, because so far we've only had pretty small teaser trailers that's just a rapid fire of really short clips. Outside of this one trailer that actually gave us a pretty good look at the awakening scene, which looks really cool. I'm fucking obsessed with this screenshot as well, because it looks so cool. And while the awakening or the meeting Aiga scene isn't an anime cutscene, we do know that they're in the game thanks to these screenshots. I'm guessing this is the opening cutscene with the main character arriving, since this seems to be the metro station, and this just looks like him walking through the city. We don't know what animation studio is doing it or anything like that, but it looks pretty good from the screenshots that we have. We also got a glimpse at what's most likely the new opening, and with a glimpse I mean that we literally got one frame. That one frame does look really nice though, and it confirms that we're 100% getting a new opening animation, which was also said in an interview, but we don't know what they're doing with the opening song. They're literally just talking about animations. We don't know if they're gonna be remaking Burn My Dread or if we're getting a completely new song, but we do know that outside of the opening, the game will have new music and new remixes. We already heard a new version of either Memories of You or Memories of the School. Both songs sound kinda similar, so I'm not sure which one it is, but you can hear that one in the TV commercial trailer. We've also heard a new Lotus Juice song, which plays in literally every trailer released so far, and it has a few notes of the Tartarus OST mixed into it. So I'm assuming that this is a battle theme. Either an alternative song, kinda like Persona 5 Royal had Lost Surprise and Takeover, so this game can have the new song and Mass Destruction. Or maybe it's just a boss theme or something else. But I think that that basically covers everything. There are some really small crumbs though that didn't really fit in anywhere, so I'm just gonna put them in here. Those being that the marketing for the game is really cool, because they're gonna reveal new information with every full moon, which I just like because it's again incorporated with the stuff that's going on in the game. From when I'm recording this at 4 AM this morning, we had our first batch of this full moon information released, but I'll have the upcoming dates for the next full moons on screen, so you can expect expect more news on these days. But since a full moon is basically a monthly thing, I'm not expecting too much to drop every single month. The previous full moon happened to coincide with the Anime Expo, so we got a panel of the voice actors, a trailer showcasing the voice actors, and some new art from the characters that we haven't seen before, but that were at the panel. But for the next few months, I'm not expecting much more than either an info blog post with some new screenshots or a small teaser trailer showing some more party members, like Aegis will probably be next. But we don't know what they're gonna do, we just know that the next information will be releasing on these days. It's just cool that we're getting information regularly, especially since we're still pretty far away from release. Usually games are like, okay, we're working on this thing, show a trailer, and then radio silence for like 5-6 months, one more trailer, radio silence until we're close to release. But no, we're getting stuff pretty regularly, we've already seen a lot and there's a lot more to come. So I feel like they're pretty confident in the game. And then the very last thing is that the game has been confirmed to release in early 2024 for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series S and X, and for PC in both the Windows Store and Steam. Which sadly means that there won't be a Switch version. There were some rumors going around because retailers had a Switch version listed, but there was no announcement in the most recent Nintendo Direct on June the 21st. So I feel like it's pretty safe to say that those retailers didn't have any actual information and they just assumed wrong. A credible leaker on Twitter also said that they didn't hear anything about the Switch version, so yeah. I'm sorry Nintendo Switch fans, it really sucks since it would be awesome if everyone could experience this game, but it looks like for now it's not gonna happen. Maybe they're holding out for the next gen Nintendo console? I have no idea, but I do hope that this game will come to a Nintendo console one day. But with that, I basically discussed everything that I wanted to talk about. And as you can already guess, I'm super excited for this remake. The more news that we get, the more excited I get, and I just think it's gonna be great. If you made it all the way to this part of the video, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry that the video is so long. It's a lot longer than I wanted it to be. I also wanted to make this a lot sooner, but you know how it is. The news just kept piling up, and it took a while to gather everything, record everything, edit all of it. And by the time I was done, more stuff started coming out, so here we are now. I don't know when my next Persona 3 video is gonna be, probably when we have enough new things that I want to talk about. I don't really want to turn this into a news channel where you come to get all the latest info. That's just one, not something that I wanna do, discuss every single thing separately in small videos when it drops. And two, even if I was interested in it, I have a full-time job and I can't get these videos out the day that the info drops anyway. So I'd rather just go over the news whenever I feel like we have something to talk about. But I do always cover the details, so maybe you will learn some new info with these videos as well. But again, that's it for me. Remember to like the video if you liked it. Be sure to subscribe as well, especially if you're interested in more Persona 3 content. But I also make a lot of other stuff, like a Tales of Arise review is out on my channel. I have a lot of ideas for future reviews, discussions, and all of that stuff. So be sure to stick around so you don't miss it. I also have a Twitter account, I'll have it linked in the description below. It's on screen, all of that stuff. Do whatever you want with it. But again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and hopefully I'll see you again soon.